Now, generally we get used to the words like industrialization. Whenever we talk about the word industrialization, we generally associate industrialization word with the factorization. Whenever we talk about the industrial workers, we get the word like factory workers. Whenever we talk about the period of industrialization, we think or we are discussing about the concept of establishment of factories. But actually, many of the historians have expressed a view that factories were there far earlier, before the industrialization happened, which means like before the industrialization progress or the so-called modern period have started, before also we had the proto industrial period, that is called proto industrialization. Proto industrial period, which means before to the industries we had the proto industrialization, the period when the industrialization was not in full progress. Also we had many number of industries known as proto industrial period. But do they exist in the same parameters and in the same system of management as it is in existence in today, either in the industries or in the factories? No, it was in a different style. How did the earlier factories, or how was the system developed, and what are the reasons for not developing in the cities and developing in the towns? That is, we have in the cities powerful trade guilds, trade unions. These unions are given special powers by the rulers to have monopoly over the particular business what they do. For example, if you talk about the cloth businessmen people, cloth business merchants do not have much scope and rights to do any business in the city, because the entire authority of monopoly is being given on the workers and on the union by the ruler to a particular group of people. So these people need to find out some other alternative to do their work done. So these people used to move to the nearby towns where there are no trade guilds, where there are no trade unions, and there is no concept of powerful issues getting involved in this work. So when merchant wants some employees, he would like to search them in the nearby towns of the city where he lives. So this made the merchants to find their ways to the towns. And let us look at the situations at the towns or at the villages. When we talk about the situations at the towns and nearby the villages, where the cultivation day by day is coming down, the poor peasants need to work like gathering of the firewood, berries, gathering of the berries, vegetables, and also hay. Like that, the original capability of the cultivation has come down because of the lack of wealth with the peasants, and also the unfavorable conditions like the lack of the rains in the proper time also made the cultivation to become a mere disaster or a failure. And also the tiny plots which are owned by the peasants cannot be cultivating so much what the family needs for them to run their entire business or the family incomes. So all these reasons made the people, those who are living in the towns and in the nearby villages, to search for a new alternatives or jobs. So when the situations were worse this side, and when the merchants need some people to work for them at very less cost and also far away from the city, so the need of the merchant, the necessity of the peasants made them to come together. So the merchants used to come to the nearby towns, identify the people, and allot works for them by dividing the entire work into different categories. So once the entire work is divided by the merchant who does business with the cloth is called merchant clothier. The merchant clothier gives the entire resources for them, like wool to the wool stapler. He collects the wool from the wool stapler, then he sends it to the spinner. The spinner will spin it, then afterwards it is sent to the weaver. From weaver it is sent to the fuller, who settles everything and makes it very clear, and then for coloring finally to the dyer. So all these stages every merchant clothier used to have 50 to 100 workers working under him and different categories, and then finally gets the work done. And after the work is done by the workers at different places of the towns, then finally it was taken to London for doing the final packing and then exported to the other countries. This London is also known as finishing station, from where the product goes out of the nation. So before this entire process happened also, before we have the factories, before we have the industries, we have the merchant system, the putting out system, the system which helps the people to come together and do work. And if you look at the peasant's point of view, the peasant's perspective here, working for the merchant is that merchants need workers, merchants need people to work far away from the towns, cities especially. But the people, those who own tiny lands, they could not leave their home villages and move on to the nearby place, because it may be occupied by somebody or something else may happen, and they cannot afford to lose their small tiny plot lands. But at the same time, if you work for the merchant, it would be an additional income for them, and that income would also help them to recover from the loss which was incurred for them by the unconditional rains or the natural effects. So that's how the proto-industrial period was also in existence before the actual industrialization started in Europe.
If you like this video, please give a thumbs up. Please subscribe to our channel to get more videos on CBSE syllabus.
So to answer the fundamental question, from where did the workers come for the Indian factories? As it was a really very difficult task for the factories which were set up in Britain. We have seen the factories facing a lot of trouble or the scarcity of the workers. So we need to find out the solution for this one. That was a big task for the Britain people, but it was completely different when it comes to the Indian context. Indians were always in search of job. So it was not a trouble at all for the Indian factory owners to find workers working at their factory. Let us go into the details now. So from where did the workers come is a fundamental question which has to be answered now. So the workers come from different places, wherever there is a job. So the basic need for the factories is the workers coming. So in 1901, when the statistics were taken, we have nearly 5,84,000 workers employed. And then when the statistics were taken in 1946, we have 24,36,000 workers working. So when you look at the statistics, it clearly shows for us there is a very huge massive growth in the number of workers getting employed. Here we have nearly 6 lakhs, here we have more than 25 lakhs of workers working here. So more than 4-fold times you got the increase of the number of workers working in the factories, which shows for us very clearly that the need for the workers has increased, has gone up to 4-fold times. When does the need for the workers increase? The need for the workers will increase only when the number of the factories are in rise. So it clearly shows for us that there are the number of rise for the factories in the Indian context. So that's how the need for the workers has increased and the number of workers has gone up. Now moving on to the other things. From where did the workers come? That is a fundamental question for us. In order to answer this fundamental question, the workers used to come from the nearby villages, where in the same case what happened in Great Britain when the agriculture failed or when they were having no lands. The people used to find the possible next alternative. In the same way, in Indian villages also, when the agriculture was failed or where there are no landless laborers, when there are landless laborers, agricultural labor people who are dependent completely only on the wages, these people started to move in search of jobs towards the cities where these factories are established. So once the factories are established, the news spread in a horizon of vertically and horizontally. The people started to move from very long distances. Initially, people used to move only between the nearby town and the village to the place of work so that they can easily go back during the time of the harvesting season or during the time of any festive season. But as the news spread on in the Bombay province and in the Madras province that in Bombay and in Kolkata and in Madras, we have a setting up of factories and there is a need for the job there, where there is a possibility of getting a job there. Immediately, people started to migrate very soon to far off places also. This was one of the major reasons why the Indian factory merchants or the owners did not find any difficulty in getting workers in the day-to-day upgradation of their factories. And what are the techniques that are used by the Indian factory owners to recruit their workers? Finding job was always a difficult task in India. Why it is described as a difficult task in India means when we have 100 jobs, the number of people looking for the jobs are more than 500 and above. So, in order to get 100 jobs, we always have a competition of 500 people waiting or looking for the job. So, this added an advantage for the people of the factory owners. So, now let us look at an example here. For example, to the factories which are located in Bombay, the people used to come from the nearby village Ratnagiri. People used to migrate from the nearby village and move to Bombay in order to work there. In the same way, we take the example of Kanpur. From Kanpur, people in around the Kanpur district used to migrate to the nearby place where the industry has been located. So that's how the possibility of getting the job, the news spread, brought all the jobless people, all the people those who are looking for a job nearby to the place where the factories are located. This gave a huge opportunity for the factory owners to choose the people to work in their factories. That's how the problem of from where do we get the workers has been solved completely and permanently for the Indian factories. And when we move on to the jobs are getting is always a difficulty in India because the number of workers are always greater than the jobs. So, in order to recruit a good people or in order to trust people, the factory owners always employed the jobber. The person is like a recruiter who recruits the people into the factory. Actually, jobber is appointed not on the basis of their educational qualifications or not on their basis of the merits. He is the senior most employee or the old person who is working in the factory from many years. That person is being given the responsibility to recruit the workers into the factory. Most of the times, he brings more number of people from his village to get them employed in the factory. Then this possibility of him getting them employed into the factories made him to get some special place in the society, in the industry, in the factories. And later on, he started to expect and receive certain amount of money, gifts or prizes in order to recruit anyone into the factory. So that's how the actual problem of from where does the workers come has been solved permanently. So this was a fundamental problem for the Britishers because when they initially established the factories, they found it very difficult to recruit workers for them to work for the wages. But here in India, if you look at the statistics in 1901, we have 5,84,000 workers working. In 1946, we have nearly 24 lakh people working. In villages, whoever does not have any work or any job or the landless poor peasants always were in search of jobs in India. These all people moved slowly towards the places where there is a possibility of getting a job. So those people, let us take an example of Bombay. In Bombay, we have the people moving from Ratnagiri, the nearby district. When it comes to Kanpur, we have people coming from Kanpur district, in and around of Kanpur towards the region. But still the factories have increased, but the getting a job opportunity was really a difficult task in India even today also. Workers were greater in number when compared to the availability of the jobs, and factory owners always used to employ jobbers in order to recruit the workers. So the jobber role has become a crucial in order to recruit the people into the factory. So in return, to get someone recruited into the factory, he started to take some amount or some gift, some price in order to give some benefit for him to get into the factory. That's how the role of jobber became very important, crucial in society as well as in the factory, because factory also needs workers. So it's completely dependent on jobber's choice of getting the workers, and the people, those who are in search of job, were always giving him some gift in order to get inside to the factory and get employed in the factory. So that's how the basic problem of getting from where do the workers come from has been solved permanently in India.
If you like this video, please give a thumbs up. Please subscribe to our channel to get more videos on CBSE Syllabus.
Now we shall move our focus of attention on how can we compare the situations of hand labor versus the steam power. How did the hand power, people's power, got replaced with the machinery power? As we discussed or highlighted the points in the previous chapter, that the point of interestedness towards the machinery was very low, which was analyzed by the historians in the previous chapter. They gave more importance for crafted, skilled persons and not for the machinery, though the machinery has brought in down the number of the employed to a very low level, but most of the industrialist people did not show much interest to go for the mechanization rather than going to employ more number of people. And now, as the situations changed, the agriculture proved to be a disaster because of the lack of the rains, lack of the infrastructure problem like the canal, water. All these things proved agriculture to come down in the production, which resulted the people to move out in search of jobs. So during this time in Britain, in America and in Australia, there was no shortage of human hands available for them to hire for their industries, because thousands of people moved from villages to the towns and from towns to the cities. The cities were overwhelmed with the population of the people coming daily into the city. Now the industrialist people, factory workers, owners decided not to go for upgrading of the machinery, but let us hire people according to their requirements and finish the work done with a very low possible cost. Because if you want to buy machinery, you need to put investment in lakhs of rupees. Instead of that, you can hire people seasonally and make lot amount of work with very less amount of investment on that. So with this ideology, they went ahead and there was no shortage of human labor for them, and during this time there was no proper employment opportunities also for the people who moved on from villages to cities. So there were many seasonal works available for them, like the gas works, breweries, bookbinding, catering during the season of Christmas, and also hand labor products. So the one more reason why the industrialist or the factory owners like to have more number of skilled workers rather than machines is that the people in Great Britain, like the aristocrat group or the bourgeois group, would love to have the products which are made by the human hands. Those are considered as the finest one according to them. So they produce nearly 500 types of hammers and 45 types of axes which are made by the human hands. So the machines were not used during that time to produce the antique pieces. So you may get a fundamental doubt, then does they really do not use machines at all? I just mentioned very clearly, the aristocrat group and the bourgeoisie were having a fashion or interest to have handmade goods, but not for the other categories of people. So only to fulfill the needs of the aristocrats and the other group who are interested to have the handmade goods, those people were encouraged with the 500 types of hammers and 45 types of axes, while the machines are used to produce uniform works like clothing or anything which is required for the abroad market for them. They used to export all the machinery products to other countries to earn more profits. And let us move on to the category of handmade goods to the other things now. How is the situation of the worker during this period of time? The worker's life was very critical and crucial during this period of time. As we discussed just now, the cities were overwhelmed and tramped with the overpopulation which is moving on or migrating into the city. As the cities got the migration of the people in very large number, providing accommodation for them also is a very difficult task. So the cities, the people finding a job has also become a tough task for them. If you want to get a job in any of the factories, you need to have your friend or your kin working in the factory who can identify you and mention you to the particular person who is in charge of the factory. Then it would be very easy for you to get a job inside. In case if you don't have any relative or any friend working there, then it may take weeks or months for you to get into the industry. And when the people are not having any jobs, there is no possibility of taking any kind of houses for rent or staying in a good location. And during that time, many thousands of people used to sleep in the gardens, where outside of the houses, on the streets, in the night. So there was no other place for them to stay. So these are some of the miserable conditions which are experienced by the workers during that time. So if you have your friend or your relative, it would be very easy for you to find a job in the company. And the work was also in the factories is only seasonal. Seasonal work means you have a work for a specific period of time only. Afterwards, you do not have that particular work under your name, because the necessity or the demand for the product comes down during that period. As we discussed before, we have the seasonal works available. Gas and the breweries work are available during the time of winter season. Repairing of the ships was also done during the time of winter, because in winter the entire water gets stagnant because of the extreme cold climatic conditions in Britain. So they would like to prefer do more number of repair works or the pending works during that period, because of the less vessel activity into the ocean during that time. And then we also have bulk of orders coming for Christmas to make the cakes, as it is a festive season for them. They need more number of hands during that period. So like that, basing on the season, basing on the requirement, the people used to get their jobs. And coming to the topic of wages increase, though the wages are increased in the early part of the 19th century, but later on we don't find any other possibility where the wages were increased to the workers who are working in the factories. It was very difficult for the workers to find their increase in the wages. Though it is increased also, it is in very less number, because there is no stable timeline for them to work. Seasonal works are more, and during the Napoleon Wars time, the products cost used to go up, so the income whatever they are getting could not suffice that one. And nearly 10% of the people in Britain were completely in the cities, are not having any work to survive. And the dissatisfaction of unemployment status, the number of people unemployed went on from 35% to 75% during this period. And also the competition of new technology and to the hands, as we were discussing about the main theme of the concept, that is spinning jenny, which was introduced during that period. And women who started to work with the jennies had in a tough competition during that period, because the spinning jenny is a machine, whereas women used to contribute their 100% efforts to make it. It has been an issue of controversy also for a very long period of time, and by 1840s, after the availability of the work has increased more because of rapid colonization, the building has been increased, the roads are started to be constructed, the railway network has to be expanded. So in order to fulfill all these things, the government, the work to be done, people those are unemployed were being deployed here. So all people started to find their jobs very soon, and in the next very few months to an year, the work requirement got doubled, and by another 30 years again it got again doubled. So that's how the need or the necessity of the work has been increased by the end of the 19th century. So now let's have a brief recap of what is the hand labor and steam power. There was no shortage of hand or human labor during the initial periods of the 18th century and the ending of the 18th century, because the first phase of the 19th century were witnessing the failure of the agriculture. Most of the people from the villages started to move to the cities in search of some job in order to survive, in order to have a piece of bread. So that situations made very good favor for the merchants of America, merchants of Britain, and also the factory owners of Britain and America, which provided there is no at all possibility to get the workers at very less wage earlier. But as the workers are coming in a triumph towards them, as huge number are coming to the cities, they would find very easy for them to employ at very less wages. And also the work was seasonal. There are different categories of seasonal works like the gas work, the breweries, the book binding, the catering, all these things emerging during the time of the Christmas. And there was a passion for the people in UK, especially the groups like aristocrats and the burghers. They would like to prefer more of the handmade goods. That was also one of the reasons why the Americans as well as the Great Britishers are preferring to have more number of skilled people rather than going for upgradation of their mills or factories with the latest machinery, which is really very costly. Instead of that, you can take some few employers or employ some people at very less wages and make them to work very skillfully and sell the product at the double the cost and earn huge profits. That's how they planned very well and executed. The worker's life was really very miserable during this period, and he could not find a job unless and until he have a friend or a kin who is working in the factory or the industry. And the seasonal unemployment means the work will be only for a few months or few days, then the rest of the time he should be unemployed. So the wage increase is a difficult task for them, because finding a wage itself is very difficult during that time, and so the life of the workers was really very miserable. During the Napoleonic Wars, the wage was not increased much. Even though it was increased, the cost of the products also was increasing day to day basis, and 10% of the people in Britain were completely poor and no employment was found for them, and the unemployment status increased from 35% to 75% in the later part of the period. And with that, we can understand by the middle of the 19th century, there was a lot of dissatisfaction among the people. Need or search for the jobs was going up higher and higher. People always used to get scared with the implementation of the new technology. Many people will be thrown out of employment. That is the reason why people are very much resistant towards the improvement of the machines into the work of the factories. Anyway, spinning jenny, a machine, was always in controversy with the women's jenny, where it has been a controversial issue for a very long time. By 1840s, the situation started to change and turn up into a new side, because lack of roads, lack of infrastructure, everything need to be fulfilled. So they started to build roads, building activity started, railway network laying work started, and also building the large towers, offices, everything gave a chance and the possibility of the unemployed youth to come and join into these categories of activities and at least get their daily bread without asking anybody. And also in the next 30 years, again the requirement got doubled. So that's what we have in hand labor and the steam power.
If you like this video, please give a thumbs up. Please subscribe to our channel to get more videos on CBSE syllabus.
Now let us see how industrialization developed in the colonies. Here, industrialization developing in the colonies, in the sense industrialization developed in India. So when we discuss about industrialization again, we in the previous part of the lesson has analyzed and understood the different factors and the reasons before the industrialization, proto industrialization period, then the setting up of the factories, discovery of the new technologies and all these things. So this time our discussion will be limited and restricted only in context to the Indian development, that too specifically on the textile industries. So the Indian textile industries would be the key agenda, and how did the Indian textile industries got emerged out with the help of the industrialization, whether it was favored or it got degraded, that we shall analyze now. So the age of Indian textiles. Indian textiles, Indian fabric, Indian cotton. Indian cotton has been the finest cotton in the world. No other country in the world produces such a fine quality of cotton available in the world market. So Indian cotton has got a special significance and a fine fabric nature when compared to the other fabrics available in the market. So during the ancient period, on the coarser cotton, Indian cotton has been known to the world by different corners, especially from the west and the northwestern boundaries of India trade. The Armenians and the Persians used to take the Indian cotton bales through the northwestern route, crossing the Himalayas and also crossing the deserts for a very long time and then taking it to the western Arab countries. And also we have a vibrant trade on oceans, especially via Arabian Sea from Gujarat and Surat. And we also have ports at Musolipatnam on the Coromandel coast and Hooghly on the Kolkata belt region. So it's not only from the west, it is from the northwest and also via to the east. We have the spreading of Indian cotton to the other corners of the world, like from the Armenians and the Persians taking from the northwest through the deserts, crossing the Himalayas to the other countries. Gujarat and Surat on the western part, Musolipatnam, Coromandel coast and Hooghly on the eastern part, taking the Indian cotton to the world market. In 1750s, till that time, the Indian cotton was the dominant one. Indian traders were the dominant traders to sell their cotton in abroad. But in 1750s, the Europeans started to arrive towards India and started to put their footprints in a very large manner. They initially got many concessions from the local courts, and later on they started to establish monopoly on the trading. So in Surat, prior to the arrival of the English people or the European nationals, the trade account or income was around rupees 16 million rupees, which has been slashed down to 3 million rupees by the end of the 17th century. The drastic fall down of the trade can be noticed here. So with the arrival of the Europeans, the trade started to slash down. That is an important understanding of this point here. And when we move on to the villagers, how did the villagers get affected with the arrival of the Europeans? The villagers got either migrated themselves because the Britishers forced the villagers to pay or to sell the cotton at very less cost. The first point. Then we shall move to the next point. The villagers, they revolted against the Britishers' policy, and sometimes they even opposed the company officials who came to give advances for them or asking to repay back the amount of money or refusing to pay the loan amounts by the villagers. So here we need to understand the logic here is how or why did the villagers started to oppose the actions of the Britishers. What made the villagers to get migrate from their own hometowns to the other places? Why are the villagers getting angry against the company officials? Why are they revolting against them? Why are they refusing to pay the loans to them? So in order to understand this one, the first logic is that the company officials initially started to make a treaties with them or a tie-ups with them, saying that they need this much of requirement, so they will pay certain amount in advance. Once the amount of money is paid in advance for them, that's like a binding the people in order to go and sell their product in the market. Though the product in the market may be costly, but because they are receiving initially advance amount for them in a very low amount, so they have to sell their product to the particular British or the European companies only. So this made the villagers to feel very much depressed and restrained, because the cost of the Indian cotton is very high in abroad, that everybody knew that, and Indians have been part of the trading communities from the very olden times. So they all knew what is the value of cotton of India in abroad. So when they were paid in very less amount, the villagers started to migrate the village, the people started to revolt against them, the village started to oppose them, and sometimes they openly declared that they were not ready to pay any kind of amounts back to the British company officials.
If you like this video, please give a thumbs up. Please subscribe to our channel to get more videos on CBSE Syllabus.
Market for the goods. As we discussed in the entire unit till now, that market for the goods has played a very vital role in this period. It may be Britishers, it may be the Indians, the craftsmen, the traders, the industrialists always want to create their own space in the market. They want to capture the hearts of the consumers so that the product cost would automatically glow into that and the business would flourish. So they want to capture the market by marketing it to a very larger scale. So that's how marketing got involved in the second decade of the 19th century, and the new products, for example, any new products which steps into the market needs some amount of publicity or some amount of understanding, some amount of idea for the people to get it. Then only the people would like to purchase that one. Then only the people have to be persuaded for that to go through or to take that particular product. So there should be a clear understanding for the person who want to buy a product on what he want to take from the market. So when there is something which is available in the market, that should be kept informed to the person who is in need. So advertisements started to play a very major role in the day-to-day activities of the business from the later part of the 20th century. Let us see them in detail now. How the English products or the Manchester products used to put their brands as the labels. Manufactured by the Manchester or made in Manchester. Today also we find many products like the Polo or Reebok. The brand name would be printed on the name. That's how the brands have come up today. But prior to this, we used to call them it as labeling. The labeling was there for the abroad products. For the Indian products, then what was the labeling for Indian products? Indian products were not labeled. Indian products were imprinted with the images of the Indian gods and the goddesses, which have given the divinity for the products and the divine blessing for the marketing sale. So that's how the Indians got connected. And not only this, if you put a label, only the educated community can understand. If you put an image, only the people, those who can visualize it, can understand the pictures. So in order to get connected to the Indians who are mostly uneducated, so the Indians started to put calendars. In calendars, though the people are educated or uneducated, they definitely use calendars to know the date and the month. So Indians started to print calendars with the Indian gods and the goddesses images, and also the product's name. Along with the product's name, printing under that, it is built or printed or made under the approval of the royal king, under the approval of the royal prince, under the approval of the royal court, which how the quality of the product would not be checked again. And when it talks about the Manchester products, Manchester people would believe that any product which has been released out of the Manchester would be taken with the trust. That's how they have branded it with Manchester. All these things added on to a very larger extent. And care, Indian people always used to market their products by putting the word like nationalism. If you care for your nation, please buy the national products. Prove that you are an Indian. Show your patriotism by utilizing only the Indian products and the local Swadeshi goods. That's how Indians also spread the spirit of nationalism by using these marketing strategies. Finally, in the entire detailed procedure of the lesson, it is very simple to understand that in the Indian industrial age or the age of industrialization, hand technology and small scale industries played a very major role in the industrial landscape of India. We have seen how the industrial growth happened in Britain, how initial stages it has got the fluctuations with the lack of the workers, later how the problem was solved. Then I have moved to an example of India, where how the Indian industries were established. How did the Indian entrepreneurs get money for that? How the owners were able to make their fortunes by doing the trade with China and Britain. Then later how did they establish the factories? What was the rate of increase of the factories? What was the rate of growth of the workers? How did they overcome the workers problem here in India? In actual terms, there was no problem of workers scarcity in India at all. So after moving on all these stages, then we discussed how did the large industries sustain and then the small scale industries. After analyzing all these things, then we moved our discussion towards understanding the marketing strategies of the later part of the 20th century. Then we learned that branding got established during this period only. Britishers or Indians, whoever were producing anything, they always want to create a space, their own space in the market. It's not in the upper space, it is in the market, it is in the brains of the people that there is a particular product that can be utilized, that is of good quality. This idea they want to fill in the brains of the people. That's what the meaning of the word creating their own space. And then when any new product has been launched, that has to be explained clearly to the people. Then only they can understand what is the value of the product and how can he utilize the product. That's how the advertisement got emerged in this century. So advertisements started to play a very major role in this period. Now also we find many advertisements coming in the newspapers, magazines, television channels, all these things. Nowadays, the most important way of focusing any product is to go for advertisements. And during that period also, as today the marketing strategies are used, during that time also, Manchester used to have their own logo of labels saying that made in Manchester, which is an assurance and guarantee. The buyer would feel confident that this is a quality worth product. That's what the image what the Manchester want to give by putting their name there. And Indian gods and Indian goddesses images were imprinted on the Indian goods to get that divine appeal for the people. That would automatically make the people to get connected towards their oneness. And also the Indian merchants used to print calendars so that not only the educated people, the uneducated people also can get understanding of the product by looking at the calendars, because everybody will use a calendar to know the date and the month in which we are, and also the year, of course. And they also used to promote the feeling of nationalism, and also to encash that one they used to write care for the nation, use the Swadeshi products, use the national products. That's how prove your patriotism, by following and using the national products. And the final outcome of the unit is that the handmade technology, the small scale industries played a very major role in the industrial landscape of India. Indian industrial landscape has been marked by the imprint of hand technology and the small scale industries. That's what we have in this unit.
If you like this video, please give a thumbs up. Please subscribe to our channel to get more videos on CBSE syllabus.
Now, what happened to the small scale industries? As we discussed in the previous part of the content here, that the large scale industries got its boom only after the First World War phase, or the boom of the First World War made the market to grow or boom in a very large scale. But what happened to the small scale industries after that time? So, do the small scale industries also got the same boom with the World War I, or what were the situations? Now let us find the answer for this. In 1911, 67% of the industries are located in Bengal and Bombay. This clearly reveals for us that the small scale industries are not at all in a larger areas. The small scale industries are also confined to the industrial areas only. The most famous industries are located in Bombay and Bengal, as we discussed earlier in the previous part. In the same way, we also have the surrounding units of the larger units are being filled with the smaller units. That's what we have to understand from here. And later, the number of workers employed were also not very large, because it was only 5% in 1911. When it moved on to 1931, when the industries were at its peak of the productions, it was only around 30%. So the rest of the 70% of the people are still in the category of unemployed. And now moving on to the 20th century, the most important changes occurred in the handloom industries. The cotton textile industries were started to face competition from the Manchester, what we discussed earlier, for large scale as well as for the small scale industries. The people, those who are producing, or the weavers community, has to face a lot of problems and a lot of troubles in order to sustain in the handloom business. Even the owners of the handlooms were facing tough times, but the growth has been stabilized and become steady only by around 1900 to 1940. But prior to this, the handloom industry was really facing a very difficult time. And when we move on to the situations, how did the situations got changed like this? The implementation of the technology added a boom to all industries. It is not restricted to any particular industry. Let us take cotton industry, let us take weaver industry. Any industry, technology has always added. It improved the efficiency, it improves the production, it reduces the workers. But the sad point is, the workers are being thrown out of the work wherever the technology has been implemented. Now, moving on to the fact here, second decade of the 20th century, which means around 1911 to 1920, we were able to see a machine called fly shuttle. The fly shuttle speeded up the production, as I told you just now. It speeded up the production, and simultaneously it has reduced the number of labor working under it. So the cost of production of the machine may be compensated by reducing the number of working members for the wages. If the wages are being reduced, automatically the cost which has been used to procure the machine can be balanced. That's how it has been added to a positive trend. And later, if you look at the statistics, 35% of the industries, especially small scale industries, which are located in the Travancore, Madras, Mysore, Cochin, are having the fly shuttle machinery with them, which means the technology has reached to a very larger scale and got connected to very large number of people. When we talked about the number of workers got employed, it is around only 30% in third decade ending. But in the second decade, we have maybe having only 10 to 15% of the workers working. But when it comes to the using of the fly shuttle, here it is 35% of the machinery has been used in Travancore, Madras, Mysore and the Cochin regions. When we talk about the Bengal region, in Bengal, we have 70 to 80% of the people using this fly shuttle. So that's how the technology got mixed up in the day-to-day life, in the industrial production and in getting out the output also for the people. And when we talk about the situations, yes, the increase in the production will automatically add to get more benefits for the workers, more benefits for the owners, but in actual reality, the situation was not like that. The boom which was created by World War I did not last long, because as soon as the World War I came down, the products from Japan, the products from China, the products from Britain started to again flood in. And all were the machine made goods. These all machine made goods were giving a stiff competition for the Indian products. Yes, the other major factor which played its influence was harvest. Due to bad harvest, the people, those who are working in the factories, because of the lack of the cotton, they were facing very tough time. The situations were really worst for them. They could not find anything to eat. They could hardly find something to eat for them. And the owners or the people, those who are doing the business, were mobilizing the entire family to work in that so that they can sustain in that. It was really a very tough time. Yes, of course, the saris like the Banaras saris or the lungis, which are very famous with the handmade prints and all, were really having their good demand in the market, especially in the Tamil Nadu region or the Madras presidency, where the production was not so high but not so low. The production was on demand. The rich people were able to use it, get benefited from this, but whereas the poor were really facing a very tough time. And that's how the small scale industries could not perish as well as the large scale industries got in the later part of the 20th century. So really it was a very tough time for them to get consolidated and sustain, but somehow they managed, but their lives were not filled with joy and happiness. They were really facing lot of problems and struggled hard to get their life into success. But they could not see the success because on an overall large scale, if you look at that, the global economic depression was also in sustaining during that period. It is around 1930s when the global crisis got implemented here, and Gandhiji starting the civil disobedience movement, the non-cooperation movements, all these movements, the nationalist movements also had their influence on the small scale industries in not getting so successfully implemented. So somehow they managed to survive, but not to do business on a large scale.
If you like this video, please give a thumbs up. Please subscribe to our channel to get more videos on CBSE syllabus.
Let us look into the coming up of the factories. As in the previous part of the lesson, we have discussed that how is the factory set up and how do we differentiate before the period of factorization and after the modern period of industrialization. As I told you just now, what are the factors that supported the merchants to do their trade out of the cities, and what are the unfavorable conditions for the merchants to not set up any of their units within the limits of the cities, as we all know that a strong monopoly of the trade unions or the trade guilds was present within the city limits permitted by the ruler of that time. So there is no other alternative for the merchants, and the situations which are not in favor of the peasants also made them to get connected with the required merchants, who thought that by working for the merchant as an additional income which would suffice their regular requirements and also can work in their tiny plots so that they can get their field in their hands, and also the work from the merchant would add on their income and the entire family can participate, what we called it as Proto Industrialization period. Now let us move on. How did first mill got set up or the factory got set up in Great Britain? The first mill which came up or the factory which came up was in around 1730s. The most common product which has seen the rapid globalization of the Britain was cotton. The two important things of Great Britain's rapid industrialization, one is cotton, the other one are metals. These two products made Great Britain's name as a very unpredictable, long-natured experience, because cotton has been exported to every corner of the world. So that's how the people around the world came to know about Great Britain. Now let's move on to the statistics. In 1760, the production of cotton was around some 2.5 million pounds. The income which the UK government was getting from the cotton production was 2.5 million pounds. Though in 1730s, the cotton industries or cotton factories were established, only by 18th century ending only they can find more number of factories available because of the various other reasons. But from 1716 to 1787, the production on the cotton has been increased nearly 11 times. That is 22 million pounds was been the income for what UK has been getting from the cotton. And with the improvement of efficacy, the improvement in the production of carding system, in the twisting system, and also in the spinning, and finally in the rolling, which increased the production of the entire cotton on a very larger scale and to meet the requirements of the international market. So the efficacy is a combination of carding, twisting, spinning and rolling, which four are the important necessary activities which have to be done in order to get cotton into your hand. And then when we move on to the other major development which changed the entire outlook of cotton in the world, Richard Arkwright. This man invented the cotton mill. Richard Arkwright's invention of cotton mill made the entire system to tremble during that time. What are the reasons for trembling of the entire institution during that time? The institution got trembled because till that time, as we discussed earlier, merchants moved to the place where the peasants are willing to work from their home. He used to supply the entire raw material to the nearby to the house place where people used to work from their household work along sufficing their income. They would work for the merchant and also work within their fields. But after the discovery of Richard Arkwright's cotton mill, the work from the household got transformed into the place called mill, where the factories have been set up. Then the entire work earlier where the wool has been bought from the person who sells the wool, then again from there to the spinner, and then from there to the fuller, and from there finally after passing through various stages it is sent to the final stage of the dyeing stage at London, where rightly London is also known as finishing place. So before, the work was done in a split process which is known as putting out system, but now everything was brought under a particular point where the mill is located. So every work, whoever want to work for the factory or the particular mill have to come and work at that particular place. This is called getting the entire work under one roof. So after you got the entire work under one roof, slowly, though the cotton mill machine was costly, people started to see more and more number of cotton mills, factories getting up, set up newly in the UK region. If you look at the map, you can see a beautiful landscape of mills getting up added day by day. It was a tremendous growth in the infrastructure as well as in the production of the cotton.
If you like this video, please give a thumbs up. Please subscribe to our channel to get more videos on CBSE Syllabus.
As we discussed till now, from where did the capital come for the Indian businessmen to put the investments? So here is the story. In order to understand the story, we need to go back, way back, Indians trading with the China people during the 8th century period. So during that period, we all remember that Indian products were exported and imported from China and the other all countries. So as the period went on, the trading has been giving a fruitful experience for the Indians. Though when we discuss initially the Britishers, I think you all remember the Opium War concept. Before, opium was not accepted by the people in China. So in order to build relations with China, Britishers started to cultivate opium in India and then export it to the other countries. Not only opium, indigo, all these things they used to do it in India and then export it to China, and then the excess surplus amount what they are getting, they used to manage it to trade with China the other products other than the opium. So that's how the business was in tactic. So Britishers were doing this business, but Indian players were juniors in this one. Indians were also involved in this to very limited extent. But the juniors, after doing for some years, they got the experience. They know how to do the business. They started to do their business practically and in a profitable way. So the most successful person among this was Dwarkanath Tagore. Dwarkanath Tagore belongs to Bengal region. He used to do trade with the China people, and up to 1830s and 40s, he was the most fortunate person to own more number of companies in China. Before he returned to India, in 1830 to 1840 period, he established nearly 6 joint stock companies under his rule. So he was the most rich person during that period of time, but due to the crisis which happened in 1840, the trade has come down and many of them lost their wealth in that crisis period. One among them was Dwarkanath Tagore. So once Dwarkanath Tagore lost his wealth, that came down again. The Indians became a junior players. But the trade which came after 1850s made many of them to get flourished, especially the Indians in relation with the China trade. Some of them who got very much profited were from Bombay, the Parsi community people, the Parsis, Dinshaw Petit and Jamshedji Tata. These people made their fortune by doing trade with China, and especially when it comes to Jamshedji Tata did not do only trade with China people. Half of his income was from the trade from the cotton which he exported to Britain also. So that's how he had double-edged profit, not only from China but also from Britain. So they had huge income as a capital for them. And we also have one more person like Seth Hukum Chand. In 1917, this man established the first jute mill at Kolkata region. So he also was one of the fortunate person who earned from the Indo-Chinese trade relations. And later on, we also have to remember J.D. Birla, the other famous name after the Tatas when it comes to business. So J.D. Birla's father and grandfather also did the same business, were in the same lines how they have earned huge profits. But later on, though Indian industries were established in the later part of the 19th century, but till we were under the control of the Britishers, India is still a colonial nation. So the activity of the Indian businessmen was completely restricted only to the Indian land, and there were a lot of restrictions not to allow the Indians to move or to do trade with the other country people or with the other trader community people. So somehow after the First World War only, many of the Indian businessmen got the chance to interact with the other businessmen people, as the demand and the necessity also gave a chance for the people to get opportunities to discuss openly and freely with all the others, because during the World War I and after the World War I, Britain started literally to come down financially and also in the terms of economic power as well as in the army powers, because they were not in a position to control all the colonies so effectively before the World War I and after the World War I. So that's how the change has brought some kind of advantage for the Indian merchants. But till Indians established their own chamber of commerce, the European merchants used to do the decisions while the Indian merchants used to put the investments. So the money was paid by the Indian people, Indian merchants, but the decisions were taken by the European merchants literally. Some of the famous stock exchange companies from the European market are the Bird, Haiglers and Company, Andrew Yule and Company, and Jardine Skinner and Company. These three are the famous European stock exchange companies in which the Indian merchants used to put their investments. But Indian merchants were not allowed in any of the discussions or not allowed to take part in any of the decision making meetings. Only they were liable or only they were permitted to put their investments, and the entire decisions were taken by the European merchants wholly and solely only to benefit their own countries, not to benefit the Indian merchants. So this is the background story of from where did we get the investments and from where did the people, those who invested in the Indian industries, got their capital amount to put industries or factories. So the story begins from the way back Indo-China trade from the 8th century BC up to 1830. Many of the Indians were in a good prosperous state where they established their own stock exchange companies in China. 1830 to 1840, Dwarkanath Tagore, one of the good examples, he established nearly 6 joint stock exchange companies in China, but due to the crisis in 1840, he needed to leave them and he came back to India. And then after later part of the 1870s to 1880s, we got again the boom in the market. The later people, those who were in business, were able to cherish and flourish. Their incomes became double and triple. Some of the most fortunate people are from Bombay, the Parsi community people, Dinshaw Petit and Jamshedji Tata. Jamshedji Tata did not only acquire the property or the capital from the trade which he did with China, but also from the cotton trade which he did with the Great Britain. And next, moving on to the other fortunate people are the Marwari businessman, Mr. Seth Hukum Chand. In 1917, this man was able to establish the first jute mill in Kolkata. And also, we always take the names of Tata and Birla together. So, the Birla groups, J.D. Birla, father and grandfather of J.D. Birla, also did the businesses in the same lines how the Parsi community people, Seth Hukum Chand and J.D. Birla fall into the same category, and later on the businesses started to flourish. But the most important problem was India was still a colonial country where we are still restrained and controlled by the British India. Most of the times Indian traders were not allowed to interact with the British merchants, and for a long period of time British merchants or the English merchants used to determine the policy making issues, whereas the investment was made by the Indian merchants. Let us look at the European stock exchange companies in which most of the Indian merchants used to put their investments. One is Bird, Haiglers and Company. The second one is Andrew Yule and Company. The third comes under Jardine Skinner and Company. These three are the major companies in which Indian merchants used to keep their investments. But on an overall say, we can say that Indians are just like a watchmen or just like a people who are followed or guided by the English people, because Indian merchants are not involved in any of the decision making meetings or the policy making issues when it comes to the trade meetings. That's how the merchants, Indian merchants especially, got their investments in order to establish their factories in India. So now we got the factories, we got the merchants, we got the capital. The last and the most important factor, where are the workers from? Did the workers in India are sufficient for India or not? Do we face any problem for the workers? Because in the initial period in Great Britain, we found it very difficult for the industrialist people or the factory owners to find people working for wages. So how did India overcome this problem? Let's find the answer for this question.
If you like this video, please give a thumbs up. Please subscribe to our channel to get more videos on CBSE Syllabus.
Now we shall look at the pace of industrial change. How rapidly did the industrial change occur? Generally, we have an opinion that the industrial change has occurred very fast, very rapidly. But let us go into the details to find out the answer for this. Did the industrial progress or the pace of industrial Industrialization took place very fast or very slow? What was the thought of the historians in regards to this one? What did they identify finally? That's what we are going to find out in this particular concept of pace of industrial change in 1.2. So the first one what we can see is that the dynamic industries of Great Britain are cotton, steel and iron. Initially up to 1840s, the cotton was a main production point and main exporting point for Britain and earning huge amount for the Britain government. But later after 1840s to 1860s, the expansion of steel and iron has made the position of the cotton, but the number one position in the imports and exports has went on to steel and iron products in only Great Britain. In 1860s, if you take the production when in compared to cotton, 77 billion pounds of income has been procured by imports of steel and iron. Whereas if it compared to cotton, it was almost more than double. And the next major changes what we can see is that first one, we have seen the change of the basic cotton to iron and steel industry, where it has almost doubled the income in respective to the cotton crop. The next one is a new traditional one. The 19th century ending also, you could not find more number of industries taking up the initiative to set up the modern machinery, because 20% of them only were able to set up even by the end of 18th century, 19th century starting, because most of the workforce were not willing to move to the cities, most of them want to be in the towns, and the machinery was very costly, and also to setting up of these things we need a lot of people to come together. So only 20% of the workforce was kept or employed under the industries, the second major factor. And the third one what we are going to discuss is the traditional industries like the non-steam and the non-metal industries got little bit reduced. For example, cotton, where cotton production was initially very high in Britain, but as the time passed on, the place of cotton was taken away by iron and steel. In the same way, the non-steam metals or the non-metal industries started to grow, but not very fast. At the same time, they were not at all in a reserved mood. They were non-stagnant. At the same time, they were not very active. They were in the middle path. As time passed on, the non-mechanized, the non-machine used industries started to develop day to day. The non-mechanized industries categories are the food processing industry, the building sector, the pottery sector, the glasswork sector, the tanning, and then the furniture. So these all industries started to grow day by day and without the use of the machinery on very larger scale. And the next major change is the technological change. The technological change was also very slow during this period in Britain. Generally, we have an opinion that in Britain, any technological aspect gets its boom very fast. But in actual practice, it is not in that way. The technological change was really very slow. Machine repair, if in case the machinery got spoiled, it is very costly even to repair the machines. So this also could be one of the reasons why the momentum of technological change could not get so much fast, well connected to the people. James Watt, the person who modernized the machine which was discovered by Newcomen to make it a steam engine in 1781. Matthew Boughton, the friend of James Watt, started to make the machinery, though it was modified and for very less cost. Up to a very long period of years, he could not find any one person willing to buy the machinery. Later on, overall, he could able to be sell only 321 machinery, out of which 80 were used for making cotton, while 9 were used for making wool, and rest were used for mining and cultivation and canals and all these things. So the first point is that the dynamic industries of Great Britain, cotton place was taken over by steel and iron industry. Up to 1840s, cotton was the dominant one, but later on iron and steel industry has taken over the position, and the import income what the Britain was getting till that time got doubled for nearly 77 billion pounds. It was not a very small amount, and that was nearly more than 2 times of the cotton's income. And one more observation which was made by the historians was that the new traditional methods, there was a gap between the new invention and the traditional methods. Though many of the cities could not adapt themselves to the new technology, but they have given scope for the traditional industries to survive for a long period. Even in the 19th century ending, only 20% of the industries are willing to have a separate factory unit, while the rest started to get most of the work done in the nearby towns and in the villages. And the third major aspect is the traditional industries started to grow up, where they were non-steam and non-metal industries, and it is non-stagnant one. Cotton started to grow up, though it was not in a very boom to its actual nature, but still it is active. And the non-mechanized industries which got developed during this period are the food processing industry, the building industry, the pottery industry, the glasswork industry, the tanning industry, and the furniture works. All these started to grow their grounds in the UK lands. And finally, moving on to the major aspect, technological changes, adoption levels are very slow, even in the industrialization nation or the country which is considered as more developed today. Also, during the initial stages, they also had the understanding very slow. Mechanical repairs of any of the machine was really very costly. That also made them to understand, let's not move on to the technological advancements, let us stay away from them. And James Watt, who modified the machine made by Newcomen in 1781, where the friend of James Watt, Matthew Boulton, has set up an industry to manufacture the machinery. It was very difficult for Matthew to find a person. So, James Watt's modification of the industry, the machinery which was made by Newcomen in 1781, and then Matthew Boulton, who was ready, agreed and started to manufacture the modified steam engine, which is going to give the increase in the production of the machinery to 4-fold times or 5-fold times by reduction of the cost. Just you need to buy the machinery to get the work done. But still it was very difficult for Matthew Boulton to find a person who is willing to buy the machinery. Overall, by 1781 to 18th century, he could find around some 321 machines in and around of Britain, out of which 80 are used in cotton and 9 in the wool, while rest are used for mining, cultivation, canals and all these things. So finally, from the historian's point of view, we can say that the traditional craftsmanship or craft person or statesmanship has its glory during this period, and it is not the machinery that is important for the people during that time. It is the craftsmanship and the statesmanship that was given high priority during this period of time.
If you like this video, please give a thumbs up. Please subscribe to our channel to get more videos on CBSE syllabus.
Now, moving on to the peculiarities of the industrial growth. Why did the industrial growth in India was different when it comes to the situation which happened in Great Britain? Because the industrial growth in Britain was adding a boom to the Britishers to develop. But when it comes to India, it has been different. What was the peculiarities that happened for that? Let us see here. For the most of the time, Indian merchants, Indian business, Indian trade was almost under the hands of the European managing agencies only for a very long period of time. Afterwards, even the Indian businessmen who established their own businesses did not try to give competition to any of the products which are being imported from the Britain, especially to the products of Manchester. They always tried to keep their market away from the influence of the British people. So they love to export their products towards China and the other countries, but not towards Britain. So they exported towards China most of their products. But the situations got changed completely in the early part of the 20th century. In the wake of the Japanese growth, Japanese developments, in 1906, the Indian yarn which they were producing has started to be produced in a very large extent. It became almost doubled in the production. But the intake for China, where Indians are exporting to China, the trade got declined. What is the reason behind the decline of trade from India to China? The products which are being exported to China are drastically declining. So for that, the Japan products started to flood in to China. The Japanese products which are coming at very less cost into China were influencing the Indian trade in the early part of the 20th century. And now suddenly there was a rise in the business after the initial phase of the 20th century. That is because of the World War II. The World War II was actually the situation which turned Indian production, Indian industries, Indian factories to a very large scale, where they were able to push up their products to the large local markets. You may get it out. How can a world war make the local products to sell, the local industries to sell their products locally in a profitable way? That happened like this. When the British mills were busy in producing for their products for the World War, Manchester, which was initially the raw supplier for India, the master supplier for India, started to stop its supply, sending it to India. It was busy in sending their products only to British because of the World War, the cloth, the bags, everything. So the home market in India has been free. The products which are coming from abroad are being blocked. The Manchester products are being stopped. So then the products which are coming within India got a very wide market. So in order to sell their products within the country, they have got a huge opportunity to them. No need to pay much taxation also, because as we all know that Indian products, if they are sent to Britain, they were put extra import duties on that by the Britishers. So automatically the cost of the product would increase. That's how the Manchester products became very popular, with the lack of the tax for them here, and India being put pressure to put more taxes on that. So people would automatically prefer the product which is getting at low cost rather than going for high cost products. And that's how the home market has increased. And also during that time, the Swadeshi movement, the use of the local products to avoid the foreign goods, the ideology started to spread to all the Indians in a very larger scale. So people also started to get themselves motivated to use the local products. So that's how the demand for the local products in the home market of India started to grow day by day into a larger scale. And along with this, the British gave a call to the Indian factories to supply for them the jute bags in the World War, the cloth in the World War, the uniform in the World War, the tents which were to be kept in the wars, the leather boots, and also the horse and the mule saddles. And this gave a boom for the Indian industries to expand in a very larger scale. The Indian merchants started to establish more number of factories, and 3-shift work has been started, where the Indian workers are made to work for long hours. That's how the production has been increased because of the World War I. The boom of the World War created a very large scale market for the Indians in a very interesting and a positive manner. But as the time increased on, and when the World War I came to an end, Manchester was not in a position to take back the original position how it was prior to the World War I. Economically, Britain was completely weak, and now the situation is they are facing a stiff competition from US, Japan and China. So there is no possibility for Britain to recapture its original back position. So now the Indian products have got their own local markets and also been flooded by the China products. China has been flooded by the Japanese products, and Manchester could not be in competition with all these things. So these all things made difficult for the Britishers to regain their position back in the global market, and this added an advantage for the Indian products, Indian merchants, Indian traders to establish their control and monopoly over the local trade on the local markets. That's how Indians were able to succeed only in the later part of the early 20th century, but initially they were struggling very hard to establish their markets because of the pressure which was being mounting on them by the European merchants, European agents and all the British officials. But only after 1920s they were able to stabilize their market in the local levels.
If you like this video, please give a thumbs up. Please subscribe to our channel to get more videos on CBSE syllabus.
Now we shall try to find out the reasons. What are the reasons that made the villagers to become so arrogant towards the officials of the Englishmen? So let us find out the background picture of what happened during that time. So the weavers, why did the weavers react like that? In 1760s, the Indian textile was on great demand. Though the Britishers were in India from 1750s, they did not enter into the textile market during that period. So the Indian product demand was on its peak during that period in the European countries. It is only in 1760s and 1770s the East India Company got established here. And on the wake of the Carnatic and the Bengal wars, the victorious East India Company want to have control on the textiles because it is finding really very difficult to secure cotton from the Indian land. What is the difficulty for the East India Company? The East India Company is facing a tough competition from the Dutch people, Portuguese people and also the French competition, wherein when the competition is more, the weaver had an options more to sell them, and finally whoever is bidding for the more amount, that person will be paid back the entire product. So the company officials have written the entire details in a letter back to the company saying that they are finding it really very difficult to procure cotton and supply it regularly back to the companies in London. So on this information, the company want to gain political control in order to monopolize the trade which is present there. So in order to monopolize the thing, they need political authority to control them. After getting the political authority after the Carnatic and the Bengal wars, the Britishers started to eliminate the traders and the brokers of the cotton. They started to slowly wipe them out from the picture. Later they appointed the Gomastas. These Gomastas have to go to the villagers, weavers especially, and collect the product from them. Loans are being flowed to the weavers. The weavers were expecting some kind of huge appreciation from the Britishers, where Britishers initially gave certain amount as loan for them and forced them not to get in contact with any of the other suppliers or any of the other buyers. So this loan amount would be restricting and binding them to get the product sold only to the British officials or the East India Company officials. So the weavers and Gomatsas were sometimes in quarrel with each other because Gomatsa also belong to the same village. There may be some personal clashes between them. So after getting the news of this one, the Gomatsas have been transferred from one region to another region, and new Gomatsas were brought from the external region of the village to be the head of the village weavers community to collect from them. And these new Gomatsas used to come with the Sipais along with them and used to force the weavers without listening to any of their problems which are happening for them, because the weavers, they have to dedicate themselves completely, and not only themselves, their family, their children, all should join together in order to complete one assignment which is required for the Britishers. And sometimes they even used to forego their cultivational lands and skip the crop for a season. So this kind of situations and the force made by the new Gomatsas using the Sipais made the villages to react, desert the villages, migrate from the villages, or revolt against the Sepoys, or refuse to take the loans initially, so that we would not be getting any kind of troubles from the Gomatsas. So that was the basic reason why the villagers revolted, resisted the company officials. The background story of this one. Let's have a quick recap of it. The weavers, why did the weavers react in such a way? The weavers actually in 1760 were in a peak of their success. Indian textiles on great demand in European market. By 1760s and 1770s, East India Company has established their foot in India. After getting victorious in the Bengal and the Carnatic wars, they want to have a regular supply of cotton to the company which is located in Britain. So in order to find the cotton supply regularly for them, it was becoming a very difficult and a impossible task for them, because they are facing a competition from Portuguese, Dutch and the French people, which made it very difficult for them. And this information we got it from the letters written to the company by the company officials. After getting this information, the company officials decided to gain political control first. After gaining the political control, they started to eliminate the traders and the brokers, whoever is dealing with the cotton trade. And after they are eliminated, in place of them, Gomatsas are appointed to take care of collection of the cotton from the weavers. So in order to get weavers in their support or bind the weavers to sell only to the company officials, the Gomatsas or the company is released certain amount of loan to all the weavers and made it binding for them to sell only back to the company officials. And these Gomatsas used to be in quarrel with the villagers whoever were not giving the cotton in time for them. So when the weavers and Gomatsas were in wars, the new Gomatsas were brought who were away from the village, new people to the village, and then these new Gomatsas would enter into the village with the Sipais and force the weavers terribly if they could not do the work in time. So these reactions and this force done by the Gomatsas made the villages to desert the villages, migrate from the village, or revolt against the Sepoys. Sometimes they even openly refused taking any kind of loan amount from them, because practically it was becoming very hectic and very difficult for the weavers to do the entire work. The entire family should get involved in this one, and they are paid very less when compared to the market price of the product for which they are providing loans for them. Next, how did Manchester come to India?
If you like this video, please give a thumbs up. Please subscribe to our channel to get more videos on CBSE syllabus.